Lord, I call to you, hasten to me, listen to my plea when I call. Let my prayer be incense before you, my uplifting hands on evening offering.
You're tuned in to Holy Smokes, Cigars, Catholicism, and Conversation. Let my prayer arise in thy sight as incense. I'm your host, Dustin Quick. This is episode 118 for Beauty and a New Regionalism with Mark and Nicole Thomason of Thomason Arts. Guys, before we jump into tonight's podcast, there's a couple of housekeeping announcements. Number one, my sponsor, Havana Palace on Huron Church Road in Windsor, Ontario, for the best service and finest cigars. Go see Caesar and Eli. They treat all their customers like family. If you'd be so kind as to go to facebook.com/Havana Palace, give that page a like. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, if you're looking to get any official Holy Smokes merch, the hoodie was just added to the repertoire. So you can go to www.catholictothemax.com/Holy Smokes and use the promo code SMOKES at checkout. You'll get 10% off your order. All right. So just wanted to get those couple things out of the way. Mark and Nicole, how are you guys doing this evening?
We're great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin.
My absolute pleasure. It's great to connect with you guys. I'm really honored and blessed. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with me here tonight and with the viewers. So before we get into kind of what you guys do and your passion, I want you to tell me, if you could, just a little bit about yourselves and how you met, your faith background, etc. If you could just give me a little rundown.
Yeah, so I'm Mark, and this is my wife, Nicole. We're obviously a married couple. We have 5 kids, so we've been married now for over 15 years. We met at grad school at Franciscan University, where we were both going to get our masters. Not at the same time. We met there unbeknownst to each other. And I'm a cradle Catholic, born and raised. We live in Denver, where I'm from. So I'm really blessed to have a good Catholic upbringing. My mom's still alive, and her biggest joy is that myself and my sister and my brother, we all still go to church. So we're blessed in that sense. And I just love being Catholic my whole life. So, you know, had lots of good events and sin like everyone else. But I learned at an early age that my mom always said there's nothing you can't go to confession for. So just get that habit of going to confession, and then you just stay Catholic. It's actually just easier too. It's just much easier to stay Catholic. So and then it was nice when we met at grad school. We waited a few years, kind of got to know each other, and then got married after we graduated. So
yeah, so I'm from Minnesota, and you might hear the Minnesota come out. My parents are both retired teachers now, and I grew up in a beautiful Catholic home, great parents, cradle Catholic as well, and went through my ups and downs and woes, you know, as everybody does. And about, I don't know, whenever it was, I went to grad school.
2004.
Yeah, 2004. There we go.
20 years
and met Mark. We were obviously at, like you said, at Franciscan, getting our master's in theology. I was also a teacher prior to that, so I took a break from teaching, art teacher. And as far as an artist and myself being an artist, I always created art. Mark's always created art. We both have our bachelor's of fine arts in art. So both kind of a hand in hand with theology and art. Then we got married, and he said we have 5 children. I'm going to be very clear. We have 5 sons, and that's a very different statement than 5 children. And they're beautiful. We just have our first one's in high school all the way to our 7-year-old. And so I teach art right now, and we're both creating, and
yeah. And the one thing that was really great is that we also not only got to study at Franciscan, which was a blessing, we actually studied in Rome as well. So we got to live in Rome for a semester. So we studied at the Pontifical University of the Angelicum is colloquially known. So that was a great time to also just be immersed in the whole thing. And our advisor, a really holy priest, said, he goes, "Don't let class get in the way of your education. Rome is the best. Rome herself is the best educator." So that was just like a whole new level. And then,
amazing.
we lived in Iowa for a few years when we were first married because of work. And just been blessed ever since.
Wow, that's fascinating, guys. I didn't know you went to Franciscan. I was actually there at the end of July, or it was mid-July, for a Catholic Creators Conference in Steubenville. And we got to tour the St. Paul Center. We had a little conference there. And I don't know, when you guys were there, they probably didn't have Chesterton's Cigar Lounge at that time, did they?
No.
No, that was before then. Okay.
We made our own parties there, Dustin.
Right. I bet you did. Yeah. It was really cool. Great experience. I didn't get to see the campus itself, though I did get to meet Dr. Hahn in person. Did you guys have any classes with him?
No, we avoided him like the plague. Too much reading.
Yeah.
So,
he had a heavy workload.
I honestly think he had like 25 plus books. I was like, listen, I just want to get a degree. I don't want to be a theologian.
Yeah.
Right.
Fabulous instructor. Yeah. Read tons of his books. But I ended up he didn't work into my schedule, our schedules as well.
We actually both took Dr. John Bergsma.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
When he was just starting there when we were there. And he always would say to the students, I'm Han Light. I was like, perfect. So
yeah, I got to meet him in person as well and had him on my podcast about 3 times. He's a wonderful man.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. He's
brilliant.
Brilliant, exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But he definitely is Han Light. It's perfect. And actually, ironically, our kid who's in high school is using his book for one of their main texts. So
nice.
Crazy full circle.
Which book is that?
The one with the little doodles. I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah. I know I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. So I was like, why do you have Bergsman's book? He goes, what are you talking about? I was like, oh, he was doing those doodles on the board for us. He hadn't written the book yet.
Oh, that's where that came from. Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's kind of see this really small Catholic family. It's crazy, to be honest.
So you guys, you studied, you got your master's in theology. What was your guys' areas of focus specifically?
Mine was just general theology. Didn't jump into anything specific. Was pretty lazy about it. The course that I took the most was on renewal, though. I really like Vatican II documents and ecclesial renewal and ecclesial structures. You were more biblical.
Yeah, I did a lot of biblical studies, but again, I didn't do a track with the catechetical track. We both just did the straight streamline track that they had at the time.
We didn't do languages either. There's always like 2 or 3 that you could tell are going to go off to become super nerds, like the guys,
doctors of the church.
The guys like reading the Greek and like, this is wrong. You're like, oh gosh, stop. So, Dr. Pete Brown was one of those guys that was in our class.
He's brilliant, though.
And he's like translating it on the fly, Greek and Hebrew. I was like, gross. So
Too smart.
Lots of smart people there. But
well, you guys did get your master's. I mean, that counts for something, right? So
yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, they gave it to us after all. So
right.
As far as like my bachelor's in fine arts, my emphasis was painting.
Okay.
So studio work and painting, and then my program had like a primary and secondary emphasis as opposed to like a major and a minor. So my secondary emphasis was ceramics. I can't think of what it's called. Craft work. So fine arts and crafts. Artisan work. Yeah. So ceramics and that kind of department.
Okay.
My focus is a ceramicist, but right now my work primarily is in charcoal and watercolor. So and Mark is pretty much an oil painter right now.
Yeah. Ceramics are awesome, but they're just such dynamic differences in the parts of the country. So like out here in the West, they dry super fast.
Oh, okay.
Versus like somewhere in the Northeast, or you have to, just different moistures.
The more complicated materials too, because you have to have a kiln and it's expensive, and
right.
Working dynamics are different.
Wow. Well, this is really cool. You guys are the first artists that I've had on the show. So
thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is a first for me, and I'm super excited. I got to peruse some of your collections on your website, which, by the way, for you guys that don't know, the link is in the description, www.thomasonarts.com. So make sure you take a look around the website, and if you see anything that tickles your fancy, well, you know what to do, right? So, so you guys are into like contemporary sacred art. Is that a good description?
Yeah. So one of the things that like we're focusing on is it's not like Catholic art, but art by Catholics.
Gotcha.
Because like Mozart, again, I'm not a Mozart, but Mozart wrote he wrote operas and masses. And so one of the things that we've really done with artists is we've really kind of force them into one sphere. Where I think the thing that's great about art is that like I can paint a buffalo and Jesus. The other thing, at least for me, I won't speak for Nicole, but like being a contemporary artist means I'm struggling with things right now as opposed to just reproducing fine arts. So a lot of my work is very heavy organic because I want to show the human hand even more so than like a very clean painting. So like a Bouguereau or a Caravaggio or the clean paintings. Well, now we have AI and we have all those things that do that. So I'm kind of pushing against that by being, for lack of a better word, messy.
Expressive.
So my mom always says my work's so messy, but I always say like it's on purpose because I'm trying to push against the cleanliness of the contemporary like reproductions and fine art. And again, when back in the day when those guys were painting, the mastery of the cleanliness was the key. So being contemporary means facing the issues right now. So photography changed everything and computers changed everything and design work changed everything. So a contemporary artist is going to struggle with those things as opposed to what ancient artists were trying to struggle with.
Right, which is basically to create sacred art. But so you guys are just Catholic artists, is probably a better description, right?
Yeah.
Catholic contemporary artist is a good way to describe it. We spend a lot of time talking about a lot of things, and one of the categories we like to explain to people is that there are three categories of art that we represent. So we have art for art's sake, which is a lot of the times I would say God's great cathedral. So you're looking at things of nature and everyday life.
Kind of decorative work.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also talk about religious work. So this is work that could be reproduced, or religious work that's representational because of a religious subject that's within your home, decorating your home, maybe your home altar, somewhere maybe even within the campus of a church, school, but not necessarily religious in subject, but not necessarily sacred art. So when we say sacred art has the purpose of and the objective of prayer, right? So we're using sacred art as a means of prayer. And so it's set aside or set apart or consecrated to that purpose. So you would find it within a church. You would find it within a private altar, private home, private home's altar. So just those three categories, I think, helps to speak more clearly about the purpose of art and the need for it. And in a world where we are industrial and everything is corporate and made as a mass reproduction, I think
mass produced.
This is something that Mark and I feel very, very deeply and passionately about, to be conscientious consumers. And so in promoting and talking about our art and our friends who are also artists, to be aware that when you're purchasing something for your home or your office or your whatever space it is that you want to make beautiful, and we just say, hey, just stop and think what it is that you're putting in your home and why are you doing it, and that just, I think, brings it to a new level of awareness in our consumption.
And I think there's like lots of really good parallels that we do naturally, and we haven't really learned to do it with art. So like a solo cup with a beer in it versus a chalice, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of people just kind of buy like a good coffee mug that's handmade and ceramic from a local artist. It does make the coffee taste better. It's worth the money to have a better mug.
Sure.
Right? Than a paper cup from Starbucks or a plastic. And again, sometimes you have to have the paper cup. But we need to have those three kind of at least 3 or 4 layers of reality as people. And I think a lot of, unfortunately, Catholics in church have just gone to the solo cup for everything, as opposed to saying, okay, no, wait, this deserves the chalice. This deserves the handmade mug. This deserves, a plastic cup that my kid can drop and doesn't break.
Sharpie their name on it.
And so,
right.
I mean, I actually had so we were teaching kids how to receive under both species when I was working at a church. And the kids did not know how to drink because they all use sippy cups. They all use plastic. Like they never really understood the weight of and the torque of a chalice because it's heavier and everything's straws and safety. And so we actually ended up doing intinction instead because fathers didn't want to spill. but he goes,
Yeah.
but he goes, there's a moment where you realize these kids aren't using anything real. Even like a real glass cup should be heavy. So these are kind of are crystal. All these things are a part of our life, and we've just kind of fallen into mass production.
Yeah, I see that. So that you're really pushing against a cultural trend, which, I mean, that's going to keep your stuff, in demand and keep it a little bit edgy in a sense, right? That's really cool. So you got a niche there for sure.
And
so
I do have a piece that is actually at an altar of a private chapel. So I do have actual sacred work that is directly for worship.
Okay.
But I also have like some graffiti stuff that's out on the street.
Interesting. So you guys are really wide ranging in scope then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, as an artist, you get bored.
Yeah. Right. Right. Everything's a canvas, right? So you gotta make use of them.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's just 2D work. If we had full access to 3D stuff, it'd be welding and ceramics and cutting logs. Yeah. So
when you guys you met and started talking, how long before you realized, oh my gosh, this person's an artist like me, this is so cool, and you guys realized you were both passionate about the same thing? Was that like kind of instantaneous, or was it a slow burn?
It's so funny. You're like the second person the last 2 weeks to ask us this. We were at a dinner and someone asked us, wait, how did you guys meet? I don't understand. So no, we actually couldn't stand each other when we first met each other.
Really?
Yeah. I thought he was kind of I won't use the words on
pompous
on live. And that he just, I don't know. We just
I was pompous and too cool for school, and she was super giddy. And
I was happy to be at Student Mill at Franciscan.
And artists are very judgmental. Everyone's judgmental, but artists at least own it. Let's put it that way.
We're also very big personalities. And so it took us probably 2 months worth of events together, of going out and hanging out with everybody at school. And then we're like, oh, wait, we really do have a lot in common. And from that point on, so I'll confess, Mark introduced me to opera. Theater has always been a part of my life. My parents raised me with theater and musical theater and music, but never the opera. And so we got a whole group together at, like, I don't know, there's like 8 to 10 of us, and we went to Pittsburgh.
None of them had been. So.
None of us had been. And Mark, plug for my mother-in-law. She's fabulous. She sang opera. And she had a beautiful voice and sang her whole life in the church choir in our cathedral here, where we're parishioners. Anyways, so we went to La Traviata. So it is, of course, will all be my all-time favorite opera. And that was my first experience of combining all of the beauty of onstage theater and music. And it was so fabulous. And I was hooked forever. And I'm always getting him, okay, let's go to this production. This production's in town. So we're big lovers of the symphony and the theater.
But again, that's part of the challenge right now, is that opera takes work, right? So we read the script ahead of time because it was in Italian. We all went out and got Italian food ahead of time.
We made a whole thing.
Because like I was like, and I made sure these people dressed up. I was like, you're gonna dress up for the opera.
We didn't wear costume though.
But dress properly, I should say.
Sure.
But that's the and it's beautiful, but opera takes work. You can't just watch a movie on Netflix on your screen for 3 and then pause it. And I think that's part of the challenge. And again, I like Netflix and I like rock and roll and all that stuff, but that's the layers of beauty that we're not participating in. It's the difference between making your own food and just, again, making food is beautiful. It's worth the work to make fresh things.
One of the Dominican friars, when we were at the Angelicum in Rome, gave me a vocabulary word that never left my lexicon, and that was learned perceptivity. We have to have a learned perceptivity of the thing, and you until you begin to grow in your understanding of cigars and smoking, and what makes a good cigar versus a not so good cigar, versus worthy of a particular price, and so on, and how to do it, and the ritual of the thing, and the beauty of the thing, and the gesture of what it is you're doing. Taking that complete analogy and making it applicable to art, to beauty, to food, to life, making a life that is a Catholic worldview. It's incarnational, it's sacramental,
Right.
and that makes it that much more beautiful as we grow in our learned perceptivity of art, of a fine whiskey, a good wine, right, and the opera.
And again,
Yeah.
I understand why people don't like mass because it's boring. No, it takes work to learn it. And
Right.
once you learn it, you're like, oh, this is amazing. Plus, again, I always think this, like, the mass deserves the best.
Right.
So when you start hearing better masses and experiencing real acoustics, and there's an actual set of musicians, like, it just elevates the thing. Now, it doesn't mean you can't pray a bad rosary or, mumble through things. Those are all parts of the thing. But there's the hierarchy of beauty. Once you start to really appreciate it, you just can't go back. And I think that's one of the things that I feel the church needs to keep. Like, everyone loves beauty right now. It's very in vogue to talk about beauty, but we're not doing the work of the hierarchy. I mean, the cigar's got to be better than a cigarillo, which has got to be better than a cigarette, which has got to be better than like a generic cigarette. I remember this Frenchman was rolling cigarettes, and they were delicious. And I said, why did you roll cigarettes? He goes, well, because I used to smoke too fast, so I learned to roll them to slow me down. I said, well, what happened? He goes, I just learned to roll them faster. And so he rolled this in fresh tobacco and beautiful papers, and he rolled it right there. I was like, oh, this is delicious. He goes, yeah, this is what it's supposed to be. Yeah. It's not this thing you take out of a package that was made by a giant corporation full of chemicals. Like the handmade, the slow burn. These are the things that we as a faithful people crave. We crave them. And when we don't get them, we obviously are not satiated. So that's where we become consumers. And so we go back to McDonald's again. So more trinkets. And again, I'm judging people, but I'm trying to be merciful. When you see like 12,000 kind of junky things on their wall, right? No, have 5 or 6 beautiful things. Save up. Buy some better stuff. More is not better with the church. Beautiful is better with the church. And, we have a nice home altar, and we have a couple nice things there. And we kind of put our intentions there. But every once in a while, the kids bring home more cards, and it's like, whoa, this is becoming a circus.
A bit too much, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like, take the palms off, burn them. Our cathedral actually drops rose leaves.
Oh, cool.
Rose petals at Pentecost.
Yeah, I've seen that done at St. John Canisius in Chicago does that as well, I think.
So it's unbelievable. So, of course, the kids grab up all those rose leaves, and so you got rose, and it's like, oh my gosh, too much. Let's simplify and have beautiful things.
I like that. I like that a lot. It's really refreshing to hear. Today's culture is just so fast-paced, mass consumerism. There's no appreciation for anything, really. I mean, and it's so surface level. I like the way that you guys dig deep and you talk about the hierarchy of beauty and how it's like a certain level of beauty affects a certain part of us or a certain layer of us. So a certain layer out there corresponds to a certain layer in here. And when you get all those kind of connected, then you get the full incarnational, sacramentalized experience of the world. I think that's a really good way to put it. I really like that, guys. So what's your process like? How do you go from having an idea to making it happen? What's the system?
Well, so it's great. It's a great question. First of all, thank you. It's a great leading question. One of the things that's super frustrating as an artist is people always like, well, how long did that take? I was like, I don't know, 6 years. Like, what? I was like, well, there's always these ideas. So it starts as an idea and that's floating around for a while. But there's also a sense of just like urgency as well as just working. So one of the things I do is I tend to have paint in layers. So I layer it up as opposed to like one and done. And because of that, I have about 5 or 6 paintings going all the time. So I paint a layer, look at it, let it dry, come back into it, paint another layer. And usually my layers are pretty thinned out. So I use a lot of turpentines to thin out. I use oil paints. So you thin out the oil paints and layer it up slowly to build up the textures. So that's kind of my process. Because of that process, I tend to work in big moments and then take time. So I just finished like 6 or 7 little buffaloes, and now I'm working on an enunciation or an assumption. So the assumption is going to take more time for me to just look at, a lot of staring, which is hard to quantify. You're like, what are you doing? It's like staring at my painting for an hour. And then you have to go back and forth, because one thing with art, you can get really myopic.
Yeah.
So you don't step back from it for a while. So the assumption's been going in my head for about a month. And then I just started getting on canvas 3 weeks ago. So a month before that. But in that same time, I'm still doing other things like buffaloes or weird. So part of my process is like to sketch in real time with other art. That's why having a big variety of art's better. And then once I feel something's right, paintings are never done, but sometimes they're finished. So sometimes you have to be like, all right, that's over.
That's enough. Yeah.
Yeah. But I really love oil paints because of how they dry slow. You can go back into them a lot. You can really affect that change in them. And then if it all goes bad, you can just scrape it off or paint over it. So oil paints are very forgiving in that sense, and they're very rich. Right. I actually inherited a lot of paint recently. My mentor teacher died. He was older. And so I was helping his widow clean out his studio. And she goes, what do you want to do? I was like, I'll take it. So I inherited basically all his oil paints.
Oh, wow.
So that was a huge gift. And so it was nice just to have like just hundreds of tubes of paint.
Wow.
So that gives you a lot more freedom to just screw up and try again.
Sure.
And then as far as one of the interesting things with technology, artists always kind of use technology. We pretend not to. But I like to use a projector for my paintings to project on the canvas to change the composition. So I can move it back and forth. I can change the depth. I can see what I like for size. So it's not necessarily like just a copy, but it's easier than drawing and then painting over and drawing. So I'll use a projector with some basic images to see if I like the way it lays out. And if I do, then I basically do a very simple sketch just to outline sort of so I can get the composition I want. And then I'll take it back out to the studio and get back to like the painting part. So that really has helped with the process, because composition can take a very long time. And with a projector now, you can just see if you like the way it looks with the size and depth.
Yeah, that's a stereotype I probably have. I just think of artists as like everyone else has got their, their laptops out, their iPads and doing whatever, and you guys are just sitting on a wooden floor with your pencils. And it's probably a stereotype that I have. I will admit, but no, that's cool to see how you incorporate technology into the process like that. And I also like, Mark, how you have things on the go, multiple things at once, and you as you're putting a layer to this, you're going over to this project and maybe adding an extra layer or taking one away. So you're constantly, there's this like fluidity between projects. You're not just like stone focused on this one thing at a time. I think that's really cool. Probably keeps you busy too, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. One of my pieces, Encounter, I definitely thought it was going to go one direction, and it did not. It went a whole different direction, which is great. But there's like a lot of like, what is this painting trying to do? So then after like a couple months, I thought, well, I'll bring it back in and use the projector to see some different images on top of it to see if that helps me figure out what I want to do with it. Because if not, just staring at it after 3 weeks, like, I don't know what this painting is. But yeah, the process of having multiple things is really helpful to me a lot, in that I can feel productive, but also not feel rushed. So like the painting Encounter I was trying to do it for the Eucharistic Revival, didn't get done, but I was still doing other things at the same time. Oh, are you there?
Uh-oh, we glitched.
I think you froze, or we froze.
Give it a second.
No. We are still on the show. Hi, everybody. This is Holy Smoke.
Say a prayer that he can get back on.
So if we're still streaming, this is Thomason Arts. I'm Mark Thomason.
Stop.
It's still live.
I know it's still live.
Fill the air.
I guess we can fill the air with something
Fill the
fun.
air.
Well, hopefully Dustin can get back in. We'll check and see if we need to log out and log back in. But you know what I'll do is I'll answer that same question. Although he's not going to, I don't know if he'll be able to hear it. But anyway, since it's live, I'll just go ahead and answer that same question. My process is a little bit different, and I do bodies of work, and then when I'm done with the body work, I've kind of just stopped doing that body of work for a while. But my subjects kind of always remain the same, religious subjects, and then I have an obsession with rabbits and birds. That's linked to my childhood and
Whimsical little creatures.
Whimsical little creatures. I started doing a lot of research in my Scandinavian heritage and background. And being an elementary school art teacher really informs the bodies of work that I do as well. Dustin's texting, so I think he's going to be able to get back on. So what I'll do is my daily life in and out as a mother and an artist, a wife, a teacher, it informs the work that I'm doing.
Hey,
Guys, I'm so sorry. Somebody was telling me about a week ago they were on StreamYard and having issues. I literally just got kicked off for no apparent reason, and my internet's fine. So I do really apologize for that.
no problem.
No,
we just
no
kept talking.
We
Oh,
filled
great.
the air, so I started talking about my process of the artwork, and I was telling about how I make a body of work and then kind of move on and do a different body of work and a different body of work. My subjects are usually always the same. Again, I'm a trained ceramicist, but don't always use that medium because it's not as adaptable to small spaces, home, life, children, people, animals, school, sleep deprived, etc. So I found that watercolor is very forgiving, and I can do that at any time, no harsh chemicals. And I started to really, really love doing these the Saint series that I did. It was very much informed by being in the West now, retablos and stained glass windows, which I look at every day, all day. And when we're at Mass, it's very much informative. And then my Scandinavian heritage, I started looking at motifs and designs of the different my Scandinavian background. So anyway, I started incorporating all this, but I wanted it to be very loose. And what I found is the more I tried to paint loosely, the tighter it got. And I was like, okay, this is just how I paint. And then when I do charcoal, there's something very special for me about charcoal because it's so earthy. I think of the fire, and if I didn't actually have this compressed, beautiful piece of charcoal from the store, actually taking wood that had been burnt and being able to use it. So it connects to my love of ceramics. And so the messiness of it, I love, but I also have very tight drawings. And again, incorporating technology, I do that. I use a lot of outlining. When I realized that Michelangelo created outlines and tracings and then used that to create the Sistine Chapel, I thought, oh, I can trace too. That's okay. If Michelangelo can trace, I can trace.
For sure.
So I will say the process of being an artist and creating something is so much in your head, through prayer, through thinking, through talking, through critique of other artists. And you need to walk, you need to be in quiet, I'm very, very contemplative. So I will actually draw or create something in my head several times over before I execute it. And when I execute it, I'm usually like one and done. So I will sit for the amount of hours it takes me to do it. Then I'll stop 2 to 4 hours. I'll stop. I'll come back the next day. I'll come back the next day. And I don't go on and on and on in that. That process is then complete for me. I haven't, because I am an art teacher and I'm doing so many other things. I told Mark one of my big dreams is to do a master work and start doing master works. I was never trained in oils. That's my big dream, is to be able to pick that up. I said, that's my retirement plan. I'm going to start doing oils. So that's kind of where.
Or if someone's watching and want to just give us, $1 million, we'll take it.
We'll take it. Underwrite
we'll
our
go
art
right
career.
into full-time art. Would be great.
So just kind of the process. Mark and I have done some collaborations, but we've collaborated a lot in our lives. And sometimes that doesn't work too well.
We had to have 5 of them. They have names.
We fight. So he'll say, draw this for me, and then I'll paint back into it, and then I'll draw back into it, and he'll paint back into it. And I was like, it turns out we like the composition, but I don't like the process with him.
No, that's once in a while.
Yeah, that's once in a while. So people are like, you guys should work together, and we're like, no, we do everything
we
together.
live together. We're both theologians. We're both artists. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
That's
So,
really interesting. I thought you guys being, under one roof, being married, doing the same thing, I thought there would be more of an impetus for collaboration, but again, stereotype.
He will ask for my critique, and I will ask for his.
We don't have to ask.
No, he'll say, "Hun, come check this out," and then I'll word vomit, and he'll be like, "Well, that was harsh," and vice versa. He does it to me too. I'll send him I'm like, "How does this look?" And he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
Then the worst of it all between the two of us is our 5 sons. They'll come in and they will critique and rip it to shreds, and you're like, "Well, that wasn't very kind." So we have very opinionated art people in this house.
Yeah, critique is actually essential to the process, and
It is.
one of the things I don't think people really appreciate, and I really have thought about in the last year and a half too, is like saints knew each other, artists knew each other, athletes know each other, right? So why do musicians know each other? We got to be in community. Community is everything. Community is not a secondary thing. It's not the body of Christ and then some community. The point of the Eucharist is to make the mystical body. Like we need it. Yeah. And so if artists don't have each other for critique, if musicians can't jam together, if cooks can't cook together, we're not actually growing. So like when I have a piece and I can't have someone critique it, it's never going to get to the layer. It's never going to become a masterpiece without critique. Yeah. And sometimes the critique is just like, that actually the worst critique is, oh, that's nice. Like nice is the worst word. Because nice is like the most generic, like, oh, how do you like this birthday cake? Oh, it's nice.
How nice.
And we both said, it's okay. You don't have to like our art.
Right.
That's fine.
But
no, I don't necessarily like the meal you chose to eat or the thing that you're wearing.
Or country music.
Country music. But we can all come to an appreciation of something, right? Mm-hmm. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean I can't not take the time to understand it or consider it. That's how we grow. That's how we expand ourselves as Catholics.
And this is really, unfortunately, where Catholics are losing. We've lost the culture because we're not engaged in it. We're just not in the culture. So you ask your average Catholic, like, who's your favorite contemporary artist? And they'll say, Monet. I'm like, well, he's dead, so he's not contemporary. So then they're like, well, I don't know any contemporary artists. I'm like, that's fine. Tell me your favorite American artist. They'll say Van Gogh. Again, dead, also not American. Like we're not in our own cultures. And again, I love the masters. I love what came before us, but I live here. I want to know what's going on here. And if we're not grounded in now and here, we're missing something. So Nicole said earlier, like her work's been more and more informed by the Southwest because that's such a part of our interesting Catholic culture. And one thing Pope Francis said that I really loved, he said when he first came to America, he said the American story is from the South, not from the East. It's the Franciscan missionaries, not Plymouth Rock. And that's when he canonized Junipero.
Right.
He's like, you guys need to know way more about these guys over here and the North American martyrs, and who the Catholic story is way more important. Not that the civic story isn't, but no one knows anything about Catholic history here. And I love the European saints. I love the African saints. I love the Asian saints. I love all saints. But people don't know enough about where they're at. So I painted 2 people, and one's a friar who was killed in Denver. He was a martyr. And his name is Father Leo Heinrich. And her name is Julia Greeley, and her cause is being put forward by our Archbishop. So she's a servant of God. Now, those are very local. No one's going to know these people, but I wanted to paint them because I'm from here and they walked the same streets. They went to the same churches I go to. Their bones are in my churches. And this is important. Like, this is what Catholics need to do. We need to reconnect with what's happening now and what's happening in reality and seeing what's around us. And sometimes it's harder. It's easier to say, let's hide and just bring back all the old stuff that's good.
Sure.
But that's not how we're going to win hearts if we don't re-engage. So we need musicians. We need people to make things again. We need to start becoming the creators that God made us. Like he created us so we could create other things. And unfortunately, I think most North American Catholics have become just consumers. We've become so much about buying stuff as opposed to making stuff.
I will say though,
but I still buy our art. Buy our art.
Of course, of course.
I will say, Dustin, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I have seen definitely within the last 10 years in the church, the handmade life, the creators rising up, the entrepreneurship of small business, and the conscientiousness of people realizing, oh, we do need to engage in the culture. Oh, we are engaging in the culture. We see so many beautiful small Catholic businesses and handmade things. People like yourself really coming out and speaking and being a part of a renewal in culture in America. And just to keep going deeper, such an encouragement, keep going deeper, know your local spaces and know who you are, where you're from, and be a part of that community, wherever it is God is calling you to be a part of that community. And Mark and I have very much made an effort in our lives and for our children. So for example, we live in
Go ahead.
lower socioeconomic areas that we can actually afford.
We live in a poor neighborhood.
And but we live in a very small house. So there's seven of us. And our upstairs isn't even 1,000 square feet. So we are 3 miles from downtown. We conscientiously, this is what we feel like God has called us to do, so that we are 3 miles from downtown where culture is. So we go to the Cathedral Basilica because it is a beautiful neo-Gothic church and we love it there. And to do, this isn't just something we arbitrarily chose. Mark grew up going there, right? So his mom was a part of the choir. So this is part of his family. And we're part of the theater and Holy Ghost. Yeah, Holy Ghost downtown.
There's
two of the
beautiful
downtown
churches
parishes.
downtown.
So that's something we've chosen. And we don't shy away from the poor and the people on the street. And it is hard to see. It is hard to be around. And then being a part of the art scene. And it's hard because it's secular and it's bizarre sometimes.
And pagan and weird and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
like,
so
it's all there.
Being, not a part of the world, in the world, but not of the world. And so there's that balance of that to being salt of the earth. Christ called us to be salt of the earth. And we're still working it out very imperfectly. But just a sense of encouragement that I have seen, and we have seen some great people doing some really amazing things, and that we can do it. Like we are doing it as a church. But I would just with all our power, just keep going and do it more, because it's 2024. And before we know it's going to be 2025. So calling and asking those great questions that Pope Francis is asking, that our bishops are asking, what the Eucharistic Revival is asking, what cultural renewal looks like, and embracing that where you are in your community. I just had to put a little plug in.
Well, and I'm going to go right off that, and then you can speak to your podcast. But so there's a show down at this museum called Biophilia. It was all this weird art inspired by nature. And we took our kids to it because it was cool. It was just cool looking stuff. It wasn't sacred, but it definitely was a higher level of design. And it was amazing. And there's people that work at the art museum that I wouldn't want in my house. Let's put it that way. But they see us, and we came after Mass. So we're in our Sunday best. And we have our 5 sons with us. And you guys have 5 kids? Yeah, we just came from Cathedral. Oh, neat. In other words, we're going to bring our Catholic self to you. And we want to see the show anyway. But it's also you can't be afraid of, some shows don't go to, for sure. But if there's stuff that you can't just go see Catholic stuff. We've got to get back to seeing, and the show is really cool as well. But we got to go to museums, and we've got to go to the theater. We've got to be a part of it. And one thing I'm going to say is I love that the cigar culture is coming back, because it demands time. It demands slowing down and smoking.
Yeah. True indeed. True indeed. Well, I love those insights, really. This is something it's not, I wouldn't say off topic, it's not the right word, but one of the things that I talk about routinely with different guests is I bring in the theme of temple theology. So basically how God has made the cosmos his dwelling place, and he dwells in this sphere through his body. We're his hands and feet. So we're part of the restoration of all things in Christ. Of course, the apex of that is the eschaton, when the resurrection happens, but the renewal is happening now. And, you know, in Romans 8, how St. Paul says the creation groans and awaits the glorious liberty of the children of God. So even right now, the earth is in travail, but we are a part of that restoration of all things in Christ. It doesn't just happen after we die and await the resurrection. It's happening right now. And to your point, how do we sanctify the creation? How do we sanctify our families? How do we sanctify our neighborhoods? It's not separating what we do from the day-to-day from, okay, let's do this church stuff now. Let's put our church hats on and go occupy this space and just stay in this lane. And then we're out of the building, then we'll just go do other stuff, and we compartmentalize everything. But I like what you guys are saying, you know, get engaged, be holy where you're planted. And sometimes that means, you know, going in places that are less than desirable, but not to imbibe them, not to be sucked into them, but to transform them from within. And that's what Christ did, right? He didn't shy away from eating with tax collectors and sinners and prostitutes, but he didn't imbibe their way of life. He didn't entertain it. He called people to conversion, but the only way he could do that was to go and meet them where they were on the ground and get his hands dirty. And that's what you guys are saying, basically. And I love that.
Yeah. That's really interesting too, because I see the pagan world is already there. Like, at least in Denver, there's a very, very intense food culture. There's tons of CSAs, community supported agriculture. There's tons of urban gardens. People are very, like, I'm not as devout as a vegan. I sin way more, but I know vegans that like never even look at meat, right? They're super devout for the wrong reasons, but they're strict. They keep a code, but there's a real sense that these people want something more authentic. So we're seeing the secular love of the authenticity, at least in food. I mean, the urban garden scene in Denver is crazy, and people like, and I say, oh, so they're ready for the gospel.
Yeah, because to be so dedicated to something specifically as an example of food, and where's my food coming from? Where's my source? Who's my farmer? As an example of a movement within Denver specific, and I think it's pretty across the country. Very conscientious food people. That's a starting place, right? Like,
Sure.
Agriculture is a starting place for us to engage and be a part of, because all of Christ's parables were, so many of them, all based in agriculture.
Yeah.
What an amazing connection. We just did an art show that is actually called Art and Egg. So it was an art show on a farm, and people came to the farm, and there we are with the boys, and it was just really a wonderful experience.
So yeah, it's
that's
a cool
fantastic.
little like 3-acre farm right in the heart of the city. There's this 3-acre farm, and people are buying their eggs, and they're looking at art, and there's beautiful produce. And I thought this is engagement, and I just love how the desire for authenticity is written on our hearts.
Right.
Like we all know it. We want something real.
Yeah. That's awesome, guys. One thing I did want to ask you is, on your website, you have a slogan for beauty in a new regionalism. Beauty's obvious, of course, but what is this new regionalism? I'm very intrigued by that. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, I can. So regionalism was actually a movement in our country. It's an American movement that happened, I think, the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And there were particular artists of the Midwest. So because I'm from the Midwest, I was incredibly passionate about it. So Grant Wood is an example of a Midwest. He's from Iowa. He went to Europe, studied, and then he was like, no, this isn't for me. I don't want to be here. I want to be in my roots, in my homeland. And this movement of really looking at the people of the time and painting the people of the time and the culture at the time. Lots of farm, lots of trains. So again, very Midwest. Landscapes. Probably the most popular piece would be American Gothic.
It's the guy with the pitchfork.
With the pitchfork and the sister is actually a sister that
It's not his wife.
yeah.
Oh, it's not his wife. Okay.
No, it's his sister. So Grant Wood painted this is what he's most known for, and probably what regionalism was most known for. So when Mark and I were talking about the importance of being regional, communal, community, and engaging ourselves in our western part of where we are in Colorado and the West, and I'm going to stop after this because then Mark's going to add his 2 cents. What our hope is in this time, age, and era that we're in this new evangelization, in this new renewal of everything that the church is doing and happening and trying to do, we're asking for a new regionalism. So understanding where we are regionally, locally, and then expanding that universally. So know who you are and where you are. And our artwork is in the sense embracing that idea of the regionalist artist, but in a new way today in the time that we're in.
Because I think one of the dangers that I saw in the church was just people representing old stuff. So our cathedral is neo-Gothic French style, which is beautiful. We can't just keep redoing the old things. We need to have new ideas. And because of that, we have to have new construction and new buildings. And I don't know if you can make steel and glass beautiful, but we have to try, right? You can't just like, hey, classic architecture worked, let's just do classics. Well, classic and Gothic and Byzantine and neo, like these guys riffed off each other and made things. And I think that the church kind of in the renewal just got scared and said, let's do all the old stuff. Just do all the old stuff, it'll be safe. And so for me, the idea of new regionalism is to, stop, look around, see what's informing you. Like one of my favorite churches in Denver is Holy Ghost. It's downtown. The color palette that they chose, this is a 100-year-old church. Well, not quite, 70-year-old church. The color palette they chose are colors you find in the West. They're not bright reds. The greens are more like a sandy green or like a cactus green. The blue, so in other words, the artists way back then were looking at the palette that is in reality. And so for me, the idea of regionalism and specifically new regionalism is to say, look, I like stuff in Europe. I lived in Rome. It's great. I like stuff in other parts of the world. I like borrowing things. It's all great. But borrow it to make it your own, which is what the Catholic Church does best.
Yes,
right?
Baptizing things, yeah.
Baptizing things, and then make something happen locally. And I think we see that in economics. We're seeing this whole love of Chesterton, and we're seeing these people people are obsessed with the big stuff, but they don't even know what's going on in front of them.
I would add to that. I didn't really have a deep sense and appreciation for our country, for America. What is Americana? And until I went, which I do, I mean, trust me, I love everything about Paris, everything about Rome. But then coming back to that and saying, gosh, America is just, we're an amazing people and we're beautiful. And us as Catholic Americans, we have so much to offer. On one of our road trips, and Mark's going to have to fill in here where I forget, and one of the states where we were going through, it's called the Cathedral of the Plains.
It's in Kansas.
And
it's not a cathedral.
And that's just the title of it because it's the only thing in this huge open space of a farm. And you go in on the inside of it and you're looking, and it isn't until you really look and stop and see what was the material and the resources these people had in the middle of the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
They only had wood. So the church is made of wood, but it's painted to look like marble.
Inside.
Wow.
The decoration, like the altar rail and the different parts of the decorative and motifs and designs and filigree were all painted to look like marble, but it was made of wood. And
they didn't change it. They left it the way it was, which is beautiful. And then the outside stone of the church was actually quarried a wagon day's ride away. And at the time, the bishop who wanted to build it, every parishioner had to bring 2 wagon loads of stone from the quarry to this main town. So it's literally from there.
So the community, yeah, and so the community members themselves built the church, tithed the church, and worked to create this church. And I just thought, Now there's an example of new regionalism. How amazing is that in the renewal of what we can be doing within our own communities?
Okay, now I see. So it's basically just like, I don't want to sound trite or cliche, but just being in the present, being in your surroundings, using what you have, making the most of what you have, making it beautiful, making it elegant, and just basically beautifying what you have already there with you.
100%. That's not tried at all. And the other thing is, for me, it gave me permission to realize I like painting buffaloes. Like, buffaloes are here. I'm gonna paint buffaloes, and you don't have to apologize and say, well, they're not dignified. The buffalo is as dignified as an angel, right? Like, painting both are great. Like, as far as a painting and a subject,
I might theologically disagree with you.
well, I've seen a buffalo. I've never seen an angel. So at least I can tell you if it's real or not. So that our subjects and so there's actually a beautiful cope that the Archbishop has here that has these two elk. It's super old. These two elk are bowing on the back of the cope to the Madonna.
Oh, nice.
It's super amazing. It's so Western.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, like that's exactly it. It's not like these, and it's clearly elk. They're clearly the elk. The guys who made it or the person who commissioned it saw here in Colorado. It's hand stitched. It is amazing. So that's what it means. Look around what's at you. Find your devotions locally. Support artists in Colorado, of course, because we're for everyone. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't have things from other places, but then make it our own.
I mean, the Greeks did a wonderful job. The Greeks and Romans did a wonderful job. All of Christendom did a wonderful job. And we can take the beauty and the technique and the skill of that and make that ours here in America and who we are as Catholics.
Yeah, when they discovered something, they incorporated it.
That's right.
That's what we need to start doing again to really bring renewal.
We just think of all the cultures, right, that have their own devotions.
Right.
To the different Madonnas, for example, it's just
Absolutely.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of a maxim of St. Thomas Aquinas. In some fundamentalist circles of Christianity, grace would destroy nature, would just hull it over and try to make something totally new from the ground up, and it seems kind of foreign and forced. But for us, grace deifies nature. So that kind of speaks to a new regionalism in a sense, right? Because you're taking what's already there and you're elevating it. You're not tearing it down. You're not destroying it and replacing it with something totally foreign, but you're beautifying something from the inside out. You're taking all the best of the elements and you're bringing them to the fore. So that's kind of like theological in a sense too. I like that interplay that's going on.
Yeah. Well, and I always say, the word became flesh, right? It didn't, like, one of my favorite things. So I was blessed to go to World Youth Day in Toronto with Pope Benedict, and he paraphrased one of the fathers of the church, who I can't remember all of a sudden, but the word became flesh and pitched his tent with our tents, which I love that idea. Like, because we all have the idea of a tent, but you could just see Jesus like putting a pole up and stretching the canvas. But I love the idea of like him being with us as a pilgrim in a tent of his own. So as opposed to the word becoming flesh and then being on an altar way over there, the word becomes flesh and puts his tent by our tents, which is such a great idea. And that's what makes us Catholic. That's the whole point of this thing.
Right. That's fantastic. And, another thing that what you guys are doing, it speaks to, and you brought this out, Nicole, is the new evangelization. I mean, being involved in your community and your vocation, your neighborhood, where you're at, where you're planted, and sort of just, putting your hand to the mill and hand to the grindstone and just sort of working with what you have, with what's around you, becoming just enculturated in your surroundings and that sort of a thing. And then just kind of going out and about and evangelizing through just natural means. I think that's so. A lot of your guys, even though you guys' work isn't necessarily all theological, I think your methods and your outlook are very, very intuitively theological in a very profound way. And I think this is what's going to reach people, both as lovers of art and people who need to hear the gospel. I mean, this is the kind of outlook that people need to have. And this is what's going to, I think, transform hearts ultimately. So I really like how you guys frame everything. I love your outlook. It's really refreshing to hear and fantastic.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so
Justin.
much. We have had a great time talking with you.
I had a blast, guys, and I do apologize again for the StreamYard issue. I'm glad that you stayed on and kept talking, and hope it wasn't too much of a disruption there. So I do apologize for that. But anyways, guys, before we say goodnight, rather, do you have any parting words before we sign off here?
Yeah, it's hard to do everything at once, and I understand it can be overwhelming for people. So just pick something. So instead of going to Starbucks, find a local coffee shop. Start with something easy. Find a local thing and be a part of that, because those people in that coffee shop need you. They need Christ, and not that we've become too convenient. So do the little bit of work to find something and start becoming a part of it again, so they know who you are, because by knowing you, they will know Christ.
Very well said, Mark. Well, Mark and Nicole, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And hopefully, who knows, maybe we could do this again once I get more proficient with everything, and I'll be able to share my screen and show some of your pieces and talk some more. I would be honored. Absolutely. So thanks for taking time out of your schedule to be here with me this evening. And I know people are going to enjoy this episode. First artist, and you won't be my last.
Perfect. Thanks. Let us know when we're back.
No problem. And guys, you've been tuned into Holy Smokes, Cigars, Catholicism, and Conversation. Let my prayer arise in thy sight as incense. I'm your host, Dustin Quick. This was episode 118 for Beauty and a New Regionalism with Mark and Nicole Thomason. ThomasonArts.com. Make sure you guys stop by and take a look around. All right, with that, I'm going to end the broadcast, and we'll talk to you soon. God bless.